Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Annisa. I am from English Literature 5B. My ID number 403190038. Okay, today I will explain. The film is adapted from a novel and entitled Pride and Prejudice. Okay, let me explain. This film is adapted from a novel entitled Pride and Prejudice. The novel was written by Jane Austen from the United Kingdom on January 28, 1813. The genre is about manners and satire. It's published by T. Egerton and White Ball. While the film was released on September 6, 2005, directed by Joe Wright and producers by Tim Bevan, Eric Follner, and Paul Webster. Okay, the setting of Pride and Prejudice is set in England at some point in the very late 1700s, early 1800s. The exact dates are unclear, but the action takes place sometime during the Napoleonic Wars between 1797 until 1815, because Austen reverenced soldiers and regiments. Since the novel was written and revised between 1796 and 1813, we can assume Austen set the novel at about the same time she was writing. The action moves between a few different locations in England, including Brighton, London, and the counties of Hertfordshire, Derbyshire, and Kent. But there is a little detailed description of the geographic settings. Okay, the point of view from Pride and Prejudice is narrated by an omniscient third-person narrator. The narrator has access to the characters' thoughts and feelings and explain them to the reader. The tone of Pride and Prejudice is often critical and even biting. While Pride and Prejudice is popularly considered a love story, the narrator's attitude towards various characters and even is often sarcastic. There are three mains are where the critical tone of the novel is made very clear. The first is the presentation of bullish characters, and the second is the attitude toward presentation about school class, and the last is the critiques of gender roles. Many of the characters in the novel are ignorant or foolish in some way. Okay, the mood of Pride and Prejudice combines cynicism with romance and allow readers to feel the gender-motivated tension of the era. Okay, them. There are three major themes of Pride and Prejudice: are love or marriage, pride, and reputation or class. Pride is an obvious theme because Pride and Prejudice is plot and character based, which leads perfectly to the high horse pride of Mr. Darcy and the independent pride of Elizabeth. Pride inevitably keeps them from love. Love or marriage is also a huge theme in Pride and Prejudice because that was a main goal in lives of women in the 19th century. To marry for sustainment, not for love, which is a theme argued both ways within Pride and Prejudice. Lastly, reputation or class was a theme very evidently displayed throughout the novel by Darcy's concern for his and his sister's reputation and the large difference in social class between himself and Elizabeth. Okay, the major conflict is the central conflict lies in Elizabeth's misunderstanding of Darcy. A duel of Pride and Prejudice breaks out between the two young people. It is present in the highest tradition of British theater culture. Elizabeth feels that Darcy looks down on her family. This prejudice against him is difficult to overcome. Okay, the racing action is all action that leads to the climax, such as Elizabeth's first disapproval of Mr. Darcy, her emotional change, and Lydia's action are counted as ascending action. All acts that lead to the marriage of Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy are counted as falling acts. Okay, the climax is put a ring on it. so many fields in the climax, Darcy finally proposed to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth essentially tells him that she would not marry him if he was the last man on earth. But that's not the end of the climax. Darcy gives Elizabeth a letter that exonerates him from all the charges she levied against him. But of our heroes start to question themselves. Can Elizabeth really be such a good judge of character if she was fooled by Darcy and Wickham's exterior marks? This is the climax of the novel because the greatest attitude shifts come here. The characters and characteristics from Pride and Prejudice. Elizabeth Bennet, the second daughter of Mr. Bennet. Elizabeth is the most intelligent and sensible of the five Bennet sisters. She is well-read and quick-witted, which with a tongue that occasionally proves too sharp for her own good. Her realization of Darcy's essential goodness eventually trumps over her initial prejudice against him. With William Darcy, a wealthy gentleman, the master of Pemberley, and the nephew of Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Though Darcy is intelligent and honest, his excess of pride causes him to look down on his social inferiors. Over the course of the novel, he tempers his class consciousness and learns to admire and love Elizabeth for her strong character. Jane Bennet, the eldest and the most beautiful Bennet sister. Jane is more reserved and gentler than Elizabeth. The easy pleasantness with which she and Bingley interact contrasts starkly with the mutual distaste that marks the encounters between Elizabeth and Darcy. Charles Bingley. Darcy's considerably witty best friends. Bingley's purchase of Netherfield, an estate near the Bennet, served as the impetus for the novel. He is a genial, well-intentioned gentleman whose easygoing nature contrasts with Darcy's initially discourteous demeanor. He is blissfully uncaring about class difference. Okay, Mr. Bennet, the patriarch of Bennet family, a gentleman of modest income with five unmarried daughters. Lydia Bennet, the youngest Bennet sister. She is a gossipy, immature, and self-involved. Unlike Elizabeth, Lydia flings herself headlong into romance and ends up running off with Wickham. Miss Bingley. Bingley's snobbish sister, Miss Bingley bears inordinate disdain for Elizabeth's middle-class background. Her vain attempts to garner Darcy's attention cause Darcy to admire Elizabeth's self-possessed character even more. Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner. Mrs. Bennet's brother and his wife, the Gardiners, caring, nurturing, and full of common sense, often proved to be better parents to the Bennet's daughters than Mr. Bennet and his wife. Charlotte Lucas. Elizabeth's dear friend, pragmatic, where Elizabeth is romantic, and also 6 years older than Elizabeth. Charlotte does not view love as the most vital component of a marriage. She is more interested in having a comfortable home. Thus, when Mr. Collins proposes, she accepts. Georgiana Darcy, Darcy's sister. She is immensely pretty and just shy. She has great skill at playing the pianoforte. Mary Bennet, the middle Bennet sister, bookish and pedantic. Catherine Bennet, the fourth Bennet sister, like Lydia, she is girlishly enthralled with the soldiers. Okay. George Wickham, a handsome, fortune-hunting militia officer. Wickham's good looks and charm attract Elizabeth initially, but Darcy's revelation about Wickham's respectable pace clues her into his true nature and simultaneously draws her closer to Darcy. Mrs. Bennet. Mr. Bennet's wife, a foolish, noisy woman whose only goal in life is to see her daughters married. Because of her low-breeding and often unbecoming behavior, Mrs. Bennet often rebels the very suitors whom she tries to attract for her daughters. Lady Catherine de Bourgh, a rich, bougie noblewoman, Mr. Collins, patron and Darcy aunt. Lady Catherine epitomizes class snobbery, especially in her attempts to order the middle-class Elizabeth away from her well-bred nephew. Mr. Collins, a pompous, generally idiotic clergyman who stands to inherit Mr. Bennet's property. Mr. Collins' own social status is nothing to brag out about he takes great pains to let everyone and anyone know that Lady Catherine de Bourgh serves as his patroness. He is the worst combination of snobbish and obsequious. Okay, I will choose feminist approach. The feminist approach is in literary studies is often known as feminist literary criticism. The feminist approach is one of the literary studies that is based on the view of feminism that wants justice and viewing the existence of women, both of writers and in literary works. Number one, it is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. However little known the feelings or views of such a man may be on his first entering a neighborhood, this truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered the rightful property of someone or other of their daughters. Chapter 1. It can be seen in the system of matchmaking. In this era, families have an important role to find men with large fortunes to make their daughters well married. The statement, this truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered as the rightful property of someone or other of their daughters, reflects the trope of parents to marry their daughters and accept them well married. The statement, it is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man is possession of a good fortune must be in want of wife, claims a rich man needs a wife and a woman will be the object of family to marry a rich man to secure the family's economies as a woman can get material comforts only through her husband's property. Therefore, woman cannot freely choose her spouse and is always dependent on family choice. Okay, that's an example of the feminist approach that I took among of the other feminist approach that we are looking for in the group together. Maybe until here my speak, my explain. I'm from group 1 to an analysis film entitled Pride and Prejudice. I hope you are understand what I say, what I explain, and I'm sorry if I have wrong. And the last I say, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.